I don't know what other word we need to hear, but that's a word that's been ringing in my ears, is kindness.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
for inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up, but more importantly, we are going to be celebrating Good Faith Media's 5th anniversary. And then later on in the pod, we sat down with one of our terrific colleagues, our senior media producer at Good Faith Media, Cliff Vaughn. Cliff is celebrating his 25th anniversary with Good Faith Media and all the organizations that led up to Good Faith Media. It is a wonderful conversation that you're not going to want to miss, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. And you?
I'm so proud right now.
Okay. Okay,
I
wait a minute. That's 2 weeks in a row. Last week you were happy,
Happy,
and
now
this
proud.
week you're proud. So
I know.
I'm a little worried.
We've got to get back to baseline normal soon.
Proceed.
Okay. I've been given a promotion at Good Faith Media.
Oh, you have now?
I have.
Okay. I don't remember seeing that memo, but go right ahead.
Yes. So, as you know, our guest this week is our very own Cliff Vaughn,
Yes,
who we are
indeed.
celebrating. We happen to be actually in person right now at the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship annual meeting. So, we've been able to celebrate him with many of our friends.
Absolutely.
And he has now given me the title of Chief Hazing Officer at Good Faith Media. And I, for one, who was never cool enough to be in the Greek system in college, am so excited about this new
business
title.
cards, here they come.
I am the chief hazer, and we'll get into why later. But yes, so I've gotten a promotion. How are you?
I'm doing well, yes. I'm a little tired, to be quite honest with you. We are at the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship General Assembly in St. Louis, Missouri,
Yes.
in the shadow of the St. Louis Arch. But yeah, it's been a great week here at the Assembly and celebrating our 5th anniversary as an organization, but more so celebrating our dear friend and colleague Cliff Vaughn's 25 years with all 3 organizations that culminated GFM.
Right. And I feel like for this week, we'll get a lot of listeners who are listening because, as we know, everybody loves Cliff. So
Everybody. Now, do I need to explain that?
people, I'm about to. Would you just give me a minute
Sorry. I stepped on your toes. Sorry,
All right.
Chief.
So yes, for a year we've been planning to celebrate both Good Faith Media's 5th anniversary and Cliff Vaughn's 25th anniversary
Yes.
of storytelling at this event. And so I've been meticulously, conspiring to sufficiently make him feel loved, but also a little embarrassed because that's just what
Yeah,
I do.
yeah.
So anyways,
Mission accomplished.
mission
by the way.
accomplished. So we have we created GFM buttons to wear on your lanyards, as you do when you go to things like this. And so we have these buttons that say "Everybody loves Cliff"
Yes.
in the
Genius.
refrain or in the aesthetic or the font of "Everybody loves Raymond." Because as you know, everywhere we go, people say
Everywhere.
"Oh,
Everywhere
oh,
we
we
go.
love Cliff. I love Cliff. I love Cliff," because he's been telling people stories in such a wonderful and thoughtful way for 25 years. And he has a gift, and you just can't help but adore him and his thoughtfulness and his care that he takes with your story. And quite frankly, the only reason I agreed to do this podcast with you every week is because I knew I could trust Cliff Vaughn to appropriately edit me.
He did set the tone early on. And so,
Yes,
yeah.
he did. So everybody around this convention, we are all wearing these "Everybody Loves Cliff"
Yeah.
buttons. And the funny thing is, I got in the elevator this morning with a woman who didn't have any buttons on, but she saw all of mine.
Right.
And she said, "Oh, I like your buttons." We were talking about it. She said, "I keep hearing everybody talking about these, like, Everybody Loves Gary buttons." She's like, "Do you know anything about
Oh,
those?"
Gary. Everybody loves Gary. That's
Yeah. So
hysterical.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we've had such a fun time just celebrating ourselves,
Yeah.
celebrating Cliff, and it's been a great week.
It has been a great week. Yeah. It's always good to get together with friends and colleagues wherever we go. It's amazing. I was telling the group last night at our fifth anniversary celebration just about how inspired we get being around such great people doing remarkable work. And, here at Good Faith Media, Missy, we talk about a lot of heavy topics. And it does seem like we live in dark days, but there are lights shining everywhere, and it's the good people that we encounter, and we have the privilege of telling their stories from time to time. And there's no better person in the business to tell those stories than Cliff Vaughn.
Absolutely. I mean, he has been here since the dawn of the original, the OG
Yeah.
organization
Hmm.
that birthed Good Faith Media,
Yeah.
which was Baptist Center for Ethics
Hmm.
back in the day. He started telling stories for them, and then that morphed into ethicsdaily.com and then merged, with Nurturing Faith to become
Yeah.
Good Faith Media. So he predates
Yeah. Yeah.
everything.
And what people also need to realize is that if it wasn't for Cliff Vaughn and his colleague at the time, who was our colleague for a while, Zach Dawes, in the organization that we worked for prior to Good Faith Media, Ethics Daily, my predecessor passed away, and Zach and Cliff were left. And there was some talk about closing the doors to Ethics Daily, but those two kept the ship upright and steered towards a brighter future. And they just did an incredible job keeping everything afloat, keeping content afloat. And a few years later, they brought me on as executive director. But if it wasn't for Cliff Vaughn and Zach Dawes, Good Faith Media would not exist.
Right.
And people need to know that.
Yeah, they believed in the mission, they
Hmm.
believed in the work, and that's it's so inspiring
Yeah.
again to be able to continue to work with Cliff and to see, how he is able to bring stories and communicate to all of us. So it's such a gift. We work with the best people.
Yeah.
And we are, like you said, as an organization celebrating our official fifth
Yeah.
year, starting, I mean, July was when we
Hmm.
actually, this
Yeah.
podcast predates
Yeah.
Good Faith Media officially on paper,
Right.
legally.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Good Faith Media launched in July of
July 1st,
2020.
2020.
And
I
so,
don't recommend launching a new organization during a global pandemic, by the way.
right, right. So yes, we are enjoying kind of all of the fanfare and the opportunity to just kind of take a minute and recognize all that we've done as an organization, all that our team has been able to accomplish, and it's been a great run.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you and I had the pleasure of sitting down with Cliff Vaughn this week
Yes.
to reminisce a little bit, talk about some of the stories that he has covered and some of the accomplishments that he has achieved. And we are just happy to be able to talk to him and to bring this interview to you today.
Yeah, and so we spoke with him before we got here to
Yeah,
this convention, so he was not aware that
everybody loves him.
that everybody loves him. So it was kind of that was
Yeah.
tough to keep under wraps.
Right.
But
Not what you forgot to include though is that everybody wore those buttons, but for the celebration, you got him his own special button.
yes, we had a little party celebration, and so I had everybody wore their "Everybody Loves Cliff" buttons, and then I made him a special one that was a wee bit bigger
Just a wee bit.
that says "Everybody Loves Me." So it's been fun celebrating him this week.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoy the interview. I know we'll have a lot of listeners coming on board this week just to hear him, and
Yeah.
his thoughtfulness, his care, his just passion for his work is just infectious.
Absolutely. We'll be right back with Good Faith Media's senior media producer, Cliff Vaughn. We've got a lot going on at Good Faith Media in 2025. New logo, new website, new initiatives, and if you don't know, our new magazine. Good Faith Magazine includes Bible study and lessons. Our new lesson writers are Kathy and Nathan Maxwell, and they host a free, short, weekly podcast in support of their Bible study lessons. In the Good Faith Bible Study Podcast, and it's free. Learn more about the magazine, the lessons, the Maxwells, the podcast, and more at goodfaithmedia.org. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly on this episode. And I say this every week, but this week I really do mean it because we've got a super special guest with us.
The specialist.
The specialist. That's exactly right.
Not IST, EST.
EST, that's right. Dr. Cliff Vaughn is the senior media producer at Good Faith Media. Cliff holds a BA from the University of Alabama in Huntsville, an MA from Auburn University, and a Ph.D. from Bowling Green State University. Since 2000, he has made countless videos, award-winning features, and short documentaries, and some really incredible podcasts. Good Faith Media is celebrating Cliff's 25 years of work with Baptist Center for Ethics, ethicsdaily.com, and now Good Faith Media. Cliff, I couldn't mean this anymore. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Well, it's good to be here, Mitch and Missy. Nice to see y'all as always.
All right, wait, Cliff, you and me, sidebar. Come here. Come here.
Good.
Over
I'm
the
leaning
corner.
in.
Over
Hey,
the corner.
do I need to leave?
All right. Yes. Bro, are you here? Are you here willingly? Are they holding you against
Blink
your
twice.
will? Blink twice. Do you need help?
Whenever y'all ask, I'm here.
You're good.
I am.
All right. Back to the room. Cliff, happy silver anniversary.
Yeah, wow. I can't believe it's been 25 years.
I can't either, and I will say I am sipping on a little something silver in your honor.
Thank you, Misty. You need to share.
Well, you gotta be where we are. So yeah, happy 25 years. We're so excited. I cannot believe in this day and age anyone has been in a job for 25 years. So you're either extremely happy or you can't find a way out. So
it's like the mob. It's that Al Pacino
Right.
moment
You're
in
in
The
too deep.
Godfather. I was almost out, but they keep bringing me back in.
So tell us, in 2000, how did this all? Well, I guess no, it was
Yeah.
in 2000. Yeah, how did it
Yeah.
all begin?
Well, my wife, Mary, and I had finished graduate school. We both did our doctorates at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. And when we graduated, we put out job applications, and she got a job offer from Belmont University here in Nashville. So that's what brought us to town in 1999. And so I was the quote unquote trailing spouse, just coming along. And,
Relatable.
seeing what would happen. That's right. Yeah. Seeing what would happen. And one of my sisters subscribed to what was then Baptist Center for Ethics, and she got their newsletter. It was actually I think it was a quarterly print newsletter called the Ethics Report that Robert Parham, who founded Baptist Center for Ethics, that he put out. And so my sister Carol Ann said, Baptist Center for Ethics is based in Nashville, and I really like what they do, and you just ought to reach out and just see if they need anything. So I reached out to Robert, and I met with him, and I think what got my foot in the door was the fact that I knew how to build websites. That was a hard skill that I had picked up in graduate school, and I knew HTML. And this was 2000, and he was wanting to do more stuff on the internet. And so he hired me. I think I started working 15 hours a week.
Wow.
And my main gig was getting out the e-newsletter.
I was building a website will still get your foot in the door.
Yeah, no doubt.
Just saying that has not changed.
Yeah, well, he had a website. BCE had a website, but anytime he wanted to update it, he had to go back to the website company, and it was costly. And so when I came on board, I was able to not only get out the e-newsletter, but to update the website. And so that just began. Things were more timely, we were saving money, and then the part-time turned into full-time, and so it just went from there.
And that's one thing that I think is so interesting for those who remember Baptist Center for Ethics in the early days, is that you've said that Robert really was one of the first to adopt and get online early on.
Yeah, he was very forward-thinking in that regard. He was willing to take risks in that regard, and so he was, I would say, in Baptist circles, he was a fairly early adopter of technology. I don't know when he got his fax machine. He already had that right. But yeah, he wanted to do an e-newsletter, and it quickly thereafter, the Baptist Faith and Message was revised, and he wanted to get out a curriculum, an online curriculum piece,
Mhm.
responding to that with other Baptist writers writing about those revisions. And I remember him calling me. We lived in an apartment at that time, and I remember him calling me saying, "Hey, do you think we could get a curriculum up online?" And I was like, "Yeah, we can do it." And so we released a curriculum called Real Baptists. It had, and I think 10 or 12 lessons. And so that was just another example of him wanting to use the best of available technology in a way that wasn't going to break the bank.
And I'm going to go off script here for a minute. Do you mind telling the story of when your son was born and how you handled that transition and how Robert
Yeah,
handled it?
yeah, so we were, as I said, we moved here in 99. Robert hired me in 2000. I started out part-time, went full-time, I think within the year. I'm not sure,
Mhm.
somewhere around there. But in 2003, Mary got pregnant with our son. And I remember I liked my job. I liked working with and for Robert, and I liked what I was doing. And I went to Robert and said, I'm going to be the primary caregiver for our child who's going to be born in June of 2003, and I'd like to keep working here, but it would mean that I would need to start working from home either all the time or mostly. And my memory is that he wasn't crazy about the idea, but I
Okay.
think he liked me as an employee, and I think he wanted to hopefully keep me around. And as I said, I liked working there. So he said, we'll give it a try. And so I moved home, started caring for our son, Jack, and things went well. Working from home was a good fit for me. I think I have a fair amount of self-discipline,
Mhm.
and it was just a good fit. And within, I want to say 2 or 3 years, Robert himself was working from home, and we let go of the office space we had here in the Green Hills part of Nashville. And so the staff of Baptist Center for Ethics, Ethics Daily, now Good Faith Media, we've been virtual ever since then.
So you, I
That's
mean, you've
amazing.
really been on the cutting edge in many ways. I mean, obviously in Baptist life, which is not hard to do.
Yeah, that's not a high bar.
But really in the work world in particular, in the
Yeah,
early aughts, you were working from home.
yeah.
So kudos to
Yeah, and
you.
I didn't think much of it. It was just again, I'm a self-starter, and what we were doing and still do, if you've got the right people, I think it's a good fit for working from home. Obviously, as I was saying before the interview started, I love being with y'all and my colleagues, and that time together in person is really special. But in terms of the day-to-day workflow, so much of what we do can be done um, virtually.
Mhm.
And so it was a good fit. And when the pandemic happened and so many people worked from home, that wasn't anything new to any of
Mm-mm.
us.
Right,
What was new was that we weren't, flying around on trips like we
right.
had been.
Yeah,
But the work from home piece
yeah.
was in place.
Well, Cliff, one of the things that I've really enjoyed working with you, but really, I've worked with you when I was a pastor on certain projects along with Robert. The one thing that is consistent over the 25 years you've worked through all these organizations has been you have been a master storyteller, and you're one of the best in the business at telling stories. So, what inspired you to start telling stories at an early age? Because, I mean, you're just so good at it.
Well, thank you. I love doing it. I love other people's stories. I mean, I grew up, born in 1971, so a child of the 70s and 80s, grew up on the films of Steven Spielberg, which is marking, Jaws marking 50 years. So I grew up on his stories and always wanted to be really a fiction storyteller and filmmaker. But about the time we moved to Nashville, that was about the time that high definition video cameras were available and affordable for
Hmm.
the most part. And so Mary one day said, just buy an HD video camera and just go make something. And I didn't want to make anything fiction because I thought it would be too hard to pull off well.
Right.
Whereas I thought, a documentary story would lend itself to a lower budget better. And so this was 2003, also when our son Jack was born and when I started working from home. But I made a documentary called Immaterial John about a guy here in Nashville who lives on about $3,600 a year by choice. And I was pretty naive. I thought I would just go make the film and send it to the film festival and it would be accepted and everything would be fine. And it turns out it's a lot harder to get accepted to film festivals than I thought,
Yeah.
but it did get accepted by the Nashville Film Festival because it was a local story. John was a compelling character. And even though the production values weren't great, it was my first film. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot making it. And I invited Robert to come to the film festival and see this film that I'd made. And he came and liked the film. And afterwards he said, well, maybe you could make some films for BCE. Maybe we could make
Right.
something about an issue. And I said, okay. And so that's how I actually started getting paid to tell stories one way or another. And the first one, uh, the first couple of pieces we did were documentary resources. One was on global hunger, one was on
Mhm.
Baptist-Jewish relations, and things just kind of took off. So I've always loved, certainly going to the movies, but I learned that I had a particular interest in real people's stories.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I
no,
loved
but
it.
nobody loves archives like you do.
I love
yeah.
I mean,
archives.
that sounds miserable to me.
I love archives. My undergraduate degree is in history, and to me, getting to go into an archives, uh, you're like a detective.
Yeah.
You're trying to amass evidence
Mhm.
and then present that evidence and make a case, make an argument.
Mhm.
And so I love the stuff that gets you into an archive. I love stuff that takes you months or years to produce
Yeah.
because I find that you think about it differently if you've worked on it for 2 years as opposed to 2 days. We all have to do work that is a quick turnaround, but I think there's definitely space for the stuff that you have to sit with for a while.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I mean, you have done countless stories over the 25 years with all three of these organizations. And I know I'm about to ask you something that's absolutely impossible to answer, but what has been your favorite project to work on?
I would say probably the things that have taken longer to produce, and that can happen in the podcast space and in documentary space. So Brother Molly, the podcast, worked on that maybe for a year and a half or
Mhm.
so. That was it was my first podcast. We started it I guess about before the pandemic.
Mhm.
Uh, but that one means a lot to me. The disturbances that I made, this was Robert's last project before he died. It was a story of a tribal genocide in Nigeria in 1966. It was something that Robert, as a middle schooler, missionary kid, had witnessed and carried lots of questions and trauma with him for decades and wanted to know as he got well into adulthood what really happened. And so we made that story called The Disturbances. It came out in 2016. That was a favorite. Um, Something that you shot, Mitch, the other day quickly became one of my favorites. A short documentary that you shot in Ukraine and that Rod Phillips, our new associate producer, edited called Captain Ukraine and Superhumans.
Mhm.
And it's just another example of how people are fascinating. They're all around us. The stories are all around us. And so just trying to focus people's attention. Often behind good stories, there's nastiness,
Sure.
there's trauma, there's ugliness, but what are the good things that we can salvage and carry with us?
Yeah.
So, Cliff, is there a moment or a person maybe that you interviewed that just made you think, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this for a living? And it's okay if you say me.
Oh, I say that every day, Missy,
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
So,
They're
but
not paying me enough.
is there
All
just a
right.
is there a moment that just it hit with you in a different way of I
Mm.
just can't believe this is what I'm doing?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure it's an exaggeration to say that I wake up every day with, I think, an awareness of just how fortunate I am uh, in so many ways. Parents that love me, siblings that love me, help shape me, the ability to get an education, and then now to get paid to tell stories. That is not lost on me. But aside from just, wow, I can't believe I get to do this or get paid to do this. Beyond it as a job, something that was life transformative was when Robert and I went into the Sonoran Desert working on a documentary that was eventually called Gospel Without Borders on immigration and faith communities. And we went into the Sonoran Desert. I've told the story multiple times, but long story short, we were in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and this kid wanders out of the brush and He's been lost for several days. He was moving into the United States from Mexico, and he was just exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally, and he wanted us to call Border Patrol just to come. He was just done. Um, but there's a lot behind that story, and you can see part of it in the documentary, which is online and freely available at goodfaithmedia.org. But I remember just meeting him, and I just thought the accidents of our births, his
Hmm.
and mine, like his soul was born into his body and circumstance, and mine was born into mine, and yet here we are. And what does this mean?
Hmm.
Um, that moment and my encounter, and that maybe the hour or two that I spent with him, um, I would say it changed my life. I think about it and him often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
In doing this work, as you just articulated, we deal with a lot of challenging issues. We come across really difficult stories, as you just told. What are some of those issues and stories that you have seen evolve over 25 years? Because, I mean, this is not the same world we live in now than we did in the year 2000. So, what are some of the changes you've seen over the course of 25 years in covering these stories?
That's a good question. I think when I started at BCE, this sounds silly, but back to learning HTML and being on websites, I remember like in the early days of websites, I remember actually having the thought, yeah, I think I've seen about all the websites there are to see. So I've been to Yahoo,
You have
you
covered
know,
the internets.
yeah, I've covered the internet. I kind of know what's
I
out
don't think I
there.
would admit that though, Cliff. I know some of what's out there online. You might not want to tell that in
That's
public.
true. Yeah, yeah. Let me rethink this. Cut, Rod. Yeah. But just as an example of how the world seemed much more manageable,
Hmm.
and even
Mm,
working for Robert and like church culture, it seemed like you could kind of wrap your brain around it. And
Hmm.
then, of course, everything has just been cracked open by the internet. And
Yeah.
not that's not our only change, but it just I think sometimes people don't know their left from the right. Even people who are trying to do the right, even people who are well-meaning,
Right.
confusing. And then you've got people who are just thoroughly bad actors making it worse. But yeah, just trying to wrap your brain around what's going on, the dissolution of kind of traditional church. And I'm saying that purely objectively. Like don't hear me say, oh, I'm pining for the good old days. I'm not.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not.
Are you wanting to make something great again, Cliff? Is this what I'm hearing?
Make church great again.
Yeah, make church great. Yeah, I'm not. That's not where I am. But I do feel like I've had a front row seat to just watching it crumble. And I know, and I try to be careful. I know that that makes a lot of people really sad.
Hmm.
It doesn't make me as sad as it makes some other people, and I try to remember that just because I'm not so sad about seeing some of these structures go away that other people are.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying the other people are all in on patriarchy or whatever. I just think, like a church experience, maybe they have lost and they're sad. And I think it's fair to give them room to be sad about that. But I've watched that it hasn't disappeared.
Hmm.
But I mean, we all know it is going in some other direction. And then, of course, Trumpism
Yeah.
2015 and going forward has just even well, I could go on, but
Yeah.
that, he's not responsible for all of the world's problems, but
Right.
he bears a lot of the blame.
Sure.
So, is there something you're talking about the changes, kind of overarching changes, but talk to us about some of the changes just in the nuts and bolts of media production. Like what have you had to adapt over the years? I mean, are you well, I reached this point like at 20, but are you at the point where you're just like, I can't keep up with the technology anymore, or I can't, like, what is it, what you have seen and had to adapt to in 25 years is just mind blowing to me. So talk to us about some of those kind of mechanics issues.
Well, first I'll say that the fact that, digital technology made what I do possible,
Mm.
and not just me, but so many other people. And so I'm a
Mm.
fan of it, even as it has brought problems. But um, you just look around and you see so many creative people now being able to share their creative gifts with, millions and millions of people. So I'm a fan of it. As the years have gone on, um, I'm not even sure that I've struggled so much with the nuts and bolts of it, so much as I've struggled with what I still like versus what I think other people still
Mm-hmm.
like. So I don't mind a talking head for 10 minutes if what they're saying is interesting.
Mhm.
Whereas I think a lot of people, we just structure our days differently. We consume on different platforms. And so it makes opportunities for that 10-minute talking head consumption harder. And so I feel like I still have some older values in that regard and older ways of consuming and so I hope that I'm um, working with younger people to keep telling stories or what feels like helping them tell stories in ways that are going to connect with people they need and we need to talk to. So that's what I would say most. Yeah, the technology's changing, but I feel like what I'm willing to tolerate time wise is an older value.
I think that's an interesting point because I know we spend a lot of time talking about that. Mitch and I spend a lot of time talking about that, just in our living room is you've got 60 seconds to capture someone's attention and to make a point. And gosh, that's tough.
Yeah.
But people are figuring it out, and I think we're trying, and I hope that we're
And that's one of the things that you've been able to see over the last 25 years has been the evolution of technology and the advancements within technology has affected storytelling overall. And you think about the introduction of the smartphone, and I remember I was one of the very first people to get the iPhone, and it was just, I mean, I took it into a meeting one time, and that's all the meeting was about was this stupid little contraption in my hand. But then
his mom
also,
and I like went and counted pennies. We're like, we're gonna surprise him with this for his
it's still one of the
birthday.
best gifts I've ever had. So
Clearly.
iPhone, and then the birth of my two kids. But but then also the creation of social media and the emergence of social media. It's changed how we tell stories here at Good Faith Media. But what I appreciate about you, Cliff, is your willingness to adapt to that. I mean, still love the long form storytelling. I think that can never be replaced. But your ability to evolve and not only evolve, but put out some really great short stories, whether that is a 90-second short story or a 20-minute short doc. That is where I think the brilliance of your work and Good Faith Media really lies.
Well, I think, yeah, you exhibit that, you and Missy both. And I think Good Faith Media as an organization, I think back to Robert, Robert was adaptable. He was
Mhm.
trying new things in the
Mhm.
midst of a culture that wasn't always open to that. His word for it was nimble,
Yeah.
got to stay nimble, got to be nimble. And part of it is operating as a nonprofit.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And I think that is something that we've done historically and something we are still doing well, I think, is adapting, changing, and staying nimble.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
While undergirding it are some core values.
Mhm.
I think, this podcast is the prime example of that very
Yeah,
thing
absolutely.
because it was born out of COVID.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's how it came to be. And then you took on the editing role. My apologies for all of the editing you've had to do.
But then we
But
also started doing long form storytelling through podcasts
right.
because of the pandemic too.
But this was kind of that impetus. When we were grounded, like you said, our work environment didn't change. We were all working from home, but we couldn't go anywhere. So
Yeah.
it's like, how can we adapt? How can we continue to tell stories and communicate to people? And that's really how this came, Good Faith Weekly came to be.
Yeah.
But my next question for you would be, what story do you want to tell
Oh, that's a good one.
Hmm,
that you haven't told yet?
it's a good question. I've been thinking a lot about this over the last several years. I've thought about this, and internally we've had a couple of calls about some other things, but I think one story that I'm interested in telling is how we don't give up on each other, um, and how we stop seeing fellow human beings as the enemy. Just stop. I
Mhm.
mean, whether it's people in another country or people in your own country. Back to Trump for a moment. This is why one of the reasons why he's so awful is that he turns people against each other. Why he wants to do this, I don't know, but he goes out of his way to do it.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the worst things we could expect from a president of the United States. But setting him aside for a moment, I'm interested in some sort of story that helps remind us all uh, not to give up on each other. Stop thinking we're better than other people. Stop viewing other people as your enemy. Um, I think this is a Christian message. I think it's an interfaith message. I think it's a message of love. And I do feel frustrated that I can't wrap my hands around some sort of story that makes other people that just wants to cultivate it, that just wants to make it live more out there.
Yeah.
And I'm stumped.
Yeah. Well, I'm quite certain you're going to come across that story one day and you're going to be the perfect person to tell it. So I can't wait for us to be able to produce that story.
Absolutely.
Uh, well, I mean, this has been wonderful. As I was preparing for this time together today, Cliff, I was thinking, what was my favorite Cliff Vaughn story? And I've got one. I don't know if you do.
I
But I do.
wasn't, you didn't give
I
me the
didn't prepare you,
assignment
but it
ahead
just
of
came, yeah.
time.
So it has to be that night when you and I were in New York City at Metro Baptist Church,
Oh.
and
I remember it well.
By
we
proxy, this is also my
we
favorite Cliff
attended our
moment.
first drag show inside of a Baptist church in New York City.
Yeah. First drag show I ever attended with Mitch Randall, CEO of Good Faith Media, inside a Baptist church in Hell's Kitchen in New York City.
That's right.
See, here's what I'm saying, Cliff. You wanted to tell fiction stories, and what you've learned is that the truth is way better than fiction,
The
and
truth,
way
yeah,
weirder
absolutely.
and much more unimaginable.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think I leaned over and said, "Your first drag show?" He said, "Yeah, mine too." I said, "I don't think I would have thought it in a Baptist church, but
Yeah.
uh,
I mean,
uh,
they say truth is stranger than fiction, and
yeah,
there's a good example.
yeah,
And you can't make it up,
uh-huh.
and you don't need to.
Yeah. And one
Just
of my favorite stories that you tell when you and Robert went to interview Will Campbell.
oh yeah.
to interview?
Yes.
Oh,
And so you've interviewed him and you're getting some B-roll, and what happens next?
Yeah, we interviewed Will Campbell. This was for a documentary we made about Baptists and racism. And so we went over to Mount Juliet, Tennessee, where Will Campbell lived, and we were hanging out with him in his he had like a little log cabin on his property that was apart from his house where he, hung out and met with people and did his thinking and writing. And so we got interviewed him there. We got some footage. And then afterwards, I was like, could we just get some footage of you kind of walking around the property? And he said, sure. And so he was still mic'd with the lavalier mic that I had on him. And so he walked away from the log cabin so that I could get footage of him walking away. And as he's walking away, I can hear him mumbling, just get footage of me falling on my. And so I used the footage in the documentary. I didn't use the audio. I left
oh
that part in
man,
because I thought that
you
would be a
missed an
bridge too
opportunity.
far. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Those are great.
But it was, I guess, a classic Will Campbell moment that I
Mm.
was grateful to be there for.
Yeah. Well, Cliff, we met this week in St. Louis and we celebrated not only Good Faith Media's 5-year anniversary, but your 25 years with these incredible organizations, 25 years of storytelling. But not only did we celebrate you in St. Louis, you are also one of Good Faith Media's 25 people who inspire. And it's in this issue of the latest Good Faith magazine. And we asked some people to write about you, and I want to read one excerpt from that piece just a moment and get your response to it. And so here is the words: creative, capable, compassionate, consistent. All of these words describe Cliff. The C word that may best describe Cliff for me is compassionate. During many of these 25 years, he provided compassionate care for Robert due to his health issues, where it was carrying extra loads of equipment during work events, attending meetings in place of Robert, or patiently listening to every idea. Our family will forever be grateful to Cliff for all of these acts of kindness. We are thankful for his steady leadership and servant spirit. Thanks be to God for Cliff Vaughn. And that was written by Betsy Parham. I echo
Yeah.
everything she just wrote.
Yeah. Well, I loved Robert dearly and love Betsy dearly and their family. And it's, when your sister calls you and says, "Yeah, you just go check out BCE. They're based in Nashville," and you don't know what's ahead of you. Looking back, there's no way I knew what was going to be, the case 25 years from now. And what a gift it was that Robert gave me to hire me, to let me stick around, to accompany him, countless trips in and outside the country. Yeah, I mean, she brought up the word compassion, which I'm trying to connect back to is the story that I want to tell. Like,
Yeah.
how do we cultivate more compassion in ourselves and in other people?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm grateful for Robert and Betsy, and I'm grateful for Mitch and Missy, and
Aw.
I appreciate your kindness and letting me continue to work here.
Well, we are especially thankful for you, my friend, and we count it a pleasure to be able to wake up each day and work alongside you. We celebrate with everybody else across our spectrum the career of Cliff Vaughn, because you have been an incredible inspiration to us all and have been transformative in your storytelling. But Cliff, before we let you go, we've got one last question that we ask all of our guests, and you are not going to get out of this one. So I'm going to turn it over to Missy for our final question.
I will just add my 2 cents at the end. You were talking about storytelling, and the one thing that I just always, think and hear from people is just how thoughtful and how intentional
Yeah.
you are in the care with which you carry other people's stories. And it's so obvious when we watch your work or listen to your work is that you are so thoughtful. And if there's one thing we hear over and over and over ad
Over and
nauseum
over and over.
when we're traveling, is we'll mention Cliff and oh, we love Cliff. Oh, I love Cliff. Oh, I love Cliff.
Everywhere I go.
So it has
Everywhere I
become
go.
like this inside joke with us, this refrain that we have, everybody loves Cliff. So we've got this like internal monologue of the everybody loves Raymond,
That's
like
right.
everybody loves Cliff.
Everybody loves
But
Cliff.
it is so true. And we can't argue it because you're just, unmatched.
He's just so lovable.
You are just an incredible human being. The kindest, most thoughtful person I've known. I'm so thankful to get to work with you every day. So
Likewise.
with that, here we go. So Cliff, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
I think I've answered this question before when I was on. I don't remember what I said. I hope I said love. Probably my favorite word. But in case I said that before and I need to choose something different, I'll go back to the word kindness. I was reading a column by David French at the New York Times the other day, and he was talking about the importance of kindness and how he's been trying to cultivate more compassion amidst the incivility of political culture. And he was saying that, as he's talked to people and traveled the country and trying to cultivate more kindness among people, everybody's like, not everybody, many people say, well, sure, that's all good and well, but what happens if that doesn't work?
Right.
The implication being, it's okay to be something else in order to get what I want, in order to be victorious, in order to have power. And I think that David French thinks that's fallacious thinking, certainly if you want to engage the words of Jesus. And so that was a good word for me. Again, compassion, eschewing violence. I don't know what other word we need to hear, but that's a word that's been ringing in my ears, is kindness.
I love it.
Well, Cliff, congratulations on 25 years, man. I cannot wait for the future. You're going to continue to tell stories, and I am here for every one of them.
You didn't say 25 more years, Mitch. I'm
well, if I would have done that, a snark here would have said something.
Yeah, I didn't give enough.
Hey, let me just. I hope, Cliff, that you are here for 25 more years. I will not say the same for me.
Yeah. We'll be on a beach, drinking more silver
Drinking
something.
more,
Yeah, that's right.
sipping on more
So
silver
that's
something.
right.
Yeah.
Well, as always, you're welcome back anytime, my friend. Thanks for being with us this week.